Don't wait till the last moment to make your retirement plans. And so I'm not saying that Jesus says there's something wrong with that. I think there's wise stewardship involved. There are principles involved. Be aware of those things. You may be thinking, I'll do that later on when I'm older. I've been telling my kids, you ought to start doing that now. You ought to be preparing now. Start putting something away now. Because tomorrow comes quicker than you think. And you ought to be wise in all of that. There's nothing wrong with that. We do invest in retirement. We make sure to pay our bills on time. We do purchase life and health insurance. And I make a habit of avoiding needless debt. But the bottom line is are you prepared for eternity? That's what Jesus is speaking about here. This guy was ready for everything. I mean, he's looking at all of the fields and how abundant he's been, reaping it all. And he says, man, what am I going to do? I have so much. It's time to retire. What I'll do is I'll build bigger barns. I'll store all of this. I'll have goods for the future. I'll say to my soul, rest, be merry, enjoy life. It's time for you to relax, to stop going out in that field and working. It's time for you just to enjoy life. And that's what he's saying to himself. It reminds me of my cousin. I've shared this with you before, but my cousin's husband, who had a retirement party when he reached the age of retirement, had his retirement party. And he and my cousin were making decisions about what they were going to do now that he was retired, the trips they were going to take, and the things that they were going to do. He had his retirement party. He went to bed that night and died in his sleep. He never experienced one day of retirement, not a single day of it. He had a retirement party. He put his head on his pillow, and he died. Tomorrow's promised to no one, and that's what Jesus is saying here. And that's why Jesus goes so far as to say in verse 20 that God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you've provided? Who's going to get your inheritance? Who's going to use all of the things that you labored so much for? It is not going to be you. It's going to be somebody else. He was a fool because he forgot that he had a limited time to live. Psalm 49:12 says, but man, despite his riches, does not endure. He is like the beasts that perish. Ultimately, we die. This man thought he was really about to live, when in reality, he's what we would today call a dead man walking. He forgot that eternity awaited him, and he hadn't prepared for it. That's why a great prayer would be found in Psalm 90, verse 12. Because there it says, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Lord, remind us that we only have a set amount of time. And so may we develop a wise heart so that we can approach eternity in the proper way. Because according to 1 Peter 4, verse 5, they will give an account to him who's ready to judge the living and the dead. We all will one day stand before you. And so Jesus says that God speaking to him says, this night your soul will be required of you, and then whose will those things be which you've provided? You didn't prepare for eternity. You have all the things that are to bring you comfort in this life, but you didn't provide for the future life. And so in verse 21, so is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. It's a matter of setting up proper priorities, guys. We're going to look on into verse 34, but I want to jump ahead. I want you to see verse 31 because I'm going to make a point here and then pick this up. But notice verse 31, how it says, seek the kingdom of God and all these things shall be added unto you. A moment ago, when we had Ray and Rebecca Clancy up here sharing with you and all, Dave came up, and all of you who go to this fellowship know him. He's a brother who we have over missions ministry. And he's been on staff with us for several years now. But let me tell you something, because I just spoke to him prior to coming out. And I said, Dave, I'm going to use you as an example. And he goes, uh-oh, what did I do? And I said, no, I'm going to use you as a good example, if you don't mind. He says, no, go ahead. Years ago, when I began to pray about who we would place over missions ministry, I noted something about Dave and his wife, Tina, and that is they have a heart for people who are lost. Tina has a very strong evangelistic heart. She's the kind of woman who wants to see you saved. And I saw that in her, and I've known them for many years. Well, Dave was in a profession where he was, well, I told him I wouldn't say, but I'm going to anyway. I'm breaking my word to him. He was a lawyer, a corporate lawyer, who was a full partner in a law firm. And so he'd done that for 25 years. So I had said to him and Tina, I said, could you guys pray about Dave joining us on staff and serving the Lord with us? And they said, of course. And they began to pray. And they prayed for some time. And I waited for a few months. And then finally one day, we met them for some coffee. And I still remember the conversation as we were seated there in the coffee shop. And I said, well, Dave, what's the Lord laying on your heart? Would you like to come and serve the Lord with us or what? And so Tina says, Pastor, if you don't mind me, I ask a question. And I said, of course. And she said, are we going to be able to make our house payment? And I smiled at her, and I said, if you're asking about the salary for Dave, I said, of course. I said, we're going to make sure that you receive enough to live on. And I told them the amount that I was going to give to them as a yearly salary. And Dave smiles. He just smiles at me. And he says, you're probably wondering why I'm smiling, huh? And I said, yeah, well, yeah. And he goes, every year I receive bonuses that are twice as much as you're going to give me for a year's salary. Bonuses that are twice as much as you're going to give me for a year's salary. And I smiled at him and I said, then why don't you start tithing? No, I didn't.